Hey you guys, Erin here. I am back with another moon update for you. What I'm going to be talking about today is really just this whole month of March is really quite wild. Mostly I'm going to be focusing on the total lunar eclipse coming up here. Now, this is taking place on Thursday, March 13th, but that is 11:55 p.m. Pacific time. So really for most of the world, this is actually coming through in the wee early hours of Friday, March 14th. Okay, so this is taking place in the sign of Virgo. Okay, this is coming through almost 24 degrees Virgo. It's like 23 degrees 57 minutes Virgo, and it's a south node lunar eclipse, and it is a total eclipse. Okay, not only it's a blood moon. It's just really overall very, very powerful. And not only that, but the eclipse would be visible throughout the entire United States. I think it's also mostly visible in South America, parts of the UK, maybe partial view from the UK up into Alaska. It's just a really massive eclipse. And before I really get into this, I just want to mention this, that, from my experience and from things that I have learned, it's really not in our best interest to go out and fully expose ourselves to an eclipse because they are so powerful. Okay. And really, what kind of creates an eclipse, what makes an eclipse happen is when the nodes, the lunar nodes, north and south node, are near the sun and the moon. Okay, when we have a solar eclipse, it means we're having a new moon and the sun and moon are very close to one of the nodes. If we're having a lunar eclipse, it means we're having a full moon and the sun and moon are close to the lunar nodes. Now, these lunar nodes, they are very powerful energies. They're the dragon. Okay, the north node is the dragon's head, the south node is the dragon's tail. And there's a great mythology behind this. I've already talked about this in a lot of previous videos, so I don't want to go into too much depth. But these lunar nodes, they have an influence on the journey of our soul. In fact, I've read in a couple books that it's like they rule over the journey of our soul from lifetime to lifetime, which sounds delightful, but they're actually quite aggressive. Again, we're talking about dragon energy here. When we have some kind of an eclipse, what happens is it's like we're receiving, the cosmic rays, but at the moment of an eclipse, it's cut off. Like we're cut off from that energy. And then the moment the eclipse is over, it's like a surge or a shock of energy. Okay, a lot of our ancestors would do things like go outside and smash pots just before the eclipse would occur because they were trying to smash the pots so that something would break. They're trying to prevent things from breaking in themselves or in their environment or that sort of thing, trying to break the curse. It's also even said that like eclipses are somewhat of punishment from the gods onto the kings. Okay, there's a lot of really great mythology around eclipses and what it can happen to kings, which I think is very, very interesting when we apply this eclipse to some of our world leaders' natal charts. Okay, so with all that said, I mean, they would even go out and, say their water source, if they could cover their water source or their food, they would cover up their food during an eclipse, okay? Or they'd go hide in caves, that sort of thing. And I do know plenty of people who have gone out and observed an eclipse and had nothing bad happen to them. But I've also heard a whirlwind of stories about people. One particular story comes to mind of somebody that I know that is extremely health conscious. I mean, next level health conscious, and was really just trying to open himself up to a spiritual experience and observed a total solar eclipse, and turned out he was sick for like 3 months. I also have a teacher who it's something like she paralyzed half of her body or something like that by taking a tincture at the time of an eclipse. You'll see it in movies, you'll see it in shows that, with a child who is born during an eclipse, it's a curse, that sort of thing, which there may or may not be some truth to that. But regardless, from my experience, and this is something else I've also gone into in depth in previous videos, is that I myself have experienced some really weird feelings from going out and exposing myself to an eclipse. created some serious anxiety in myself. And I'm not somebody who deals with anxiety. I worry a lot about a lot of different things. That's worrying is so different than anxiety. It was like my whole nervous system. I was practically trembling throughout the entire day after exposing myself to a total solar eclipse. So there's that. Okay. Now, what I'm going to really focus on in this recording is how we can benefit from this energy. Okay. Because it's something we can work with. It's something that we can really tap into and benefit from, but we just got to know what we're doing here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to break down the sign of Virgo for you, because this is, again, it's a full moon in the sign of Virgo. So just like any other full moon, this is the peak of a growth cycle that began approximately 6 months ago. And we had the new moon in the sign of Virgo. Over these 6 months, we've all been experiencing this opportunity for growth. It's related to the sign of Virgo, and this is very much a time to be honoring that growth. But it's also a time, just again, like any other full moon, as soon as the moon begins to wane, we set the intentions to let go of any of this Virgoan energy that's not serving us. But this is like tenfold. This is massive, because what's going to happen here is about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 hours after the full moon, she's going to start to wane, and she's going to transit over the south node, which is like a drain point. So it takes things away. And something else to take into consideration here is that if you're somewhat familiar with your natal chart, or if you've had a reading with me, you can go back and review the video recording to see which area of your life this is specifically manifesting for you, because we all experience this total lunar eclipse as a collective, but it's also incredibly unique to each and every one of us. Okay. And let's just say, for example, this eclipse is coming through your 10th house, your house of career. Okay. Then it would represent something that you would be letting go of involving your career. Okay. And not only that, the word eclipse, if you follow the etymology behind the word eclipse, I think the Greek word is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this exactly properly, but it's something like eclipsis. And that basically translates into abandoned. I mean, an eclipse is basically abandoning something. Okay. But when we abandon anything, if you abandon something or something abandons you, energetically speaking, it's making room for something new to come in. So it's like, again, you'd set the intentions. What do you want to let go of that's related to your career? Maybe it's coming through your 7th house, your house of relationships. And there's something that you need to let go of involving a relationship. Or say it's coming through your 1st house, your house of self, you Virgo risings out there. It's like, what do you want to let go of that, relates to yourself? Okay, so that's something to really take seriously when it comes to eclipses, because they are so powerful. Okay, so first I'm going to break down that sign of Virgo for you. Then we're going to pull up the chart, and I'll go through all the other prominent astrological forces we're receiving at the time of the eclipse. And then I will be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Virgo, because these parts of our body become sensitized in some way, shape, or form anytime anything up in the sky transits through the sign of Virgo. So here we have full moon in the sign of Virgo next to the south node. Okay, again, that kind of like drain point. So it's a good idea to pay a little extra attention to these parts of our body. So of course, I'll be mentioning some potential herbal remedies to help support these parts of our body. And of course, as usual, I will mention some gemstones that resonate well with the sign of Virgo. As so many of you know, every single full moon, any kind of major astrological transit, I pull out my journal specifically for the full moons. I write down the growth I'm grateful for that I've experienced that's related to that zodiac sign. I also write down what I want to let go of that's related to that zodiac sign. And of course, I apply it to the area of my life that it's manifesting through in my own natal chart. And then I like to take a few gemstones that resonate well with the zodiac sign that the moon is transiting through and put them on top of my journal. You can always find a full extensive list of stones that resonate well with the sign the moon is transiting through in the description below. And if you don't have any of these gemstones, please do not feel discouraged or you're missing out on something, because we all got to start somewhere. And really, if you want to manifest more gemstones into your life, a perfect time to do that would be a new moon. Okay, so let's get into this. The sign of Virgo is what we call a mutable earth sign. When I say mutable, what I'm talking about is adaptability, being able to adjust into new situations throughout life. Okay. And in the element of earth, all of the earth signs kind of have some sort of an association with like our work in the world, our earthly responsibilities. The sign of Virgo is very much associated with things like being of service. Okay. A lot of times when people got a lot of Virgo energy in their natal chart, they tend to make really good assistants or working some sort of a service position. Okay. Now it's ruled by Mercury. So Mercury is basically, in essence, the ruler of our mental function. It's like we're constantly receiving information, no matter what the heck we're doing. Our consciousness is receiving information. And that's really a huge part of what Mercury's job is to take that information in and store it somewhere in our consciousness, so that when we want to go reiterate that information, Mercury can go in and find that file of information and bring it back out. So with that said, Mercury is a very busy character, but has so much to do with keeping things organized. Like when somebody actually has a very, very debilitated Mercury in their natal chart, a lot of times it depends on what it is, how it's debilitated. But sometimes it's like their thoughts are scattered, or sometimes they're just kind of slow thinkers, or they lose their concentration easily, because that's, again, what Mercury is supposed to do. So this sign of Virgo has a lot to do with keeping things tidy and organized. It's like the sign of perfectionism, really. The sign of Virgo, the motto is I analyze. This is a hyper analytical energy. It's actually kind of a little bit of a nervous energy. I'll notice a lot of Virgo suns, but also Virgo risings. I think the Virgo risings show it more. A lot of times you can almost see their nervousness, but they also have this very pure looking face. Most Virgo risings have a feeling of pureness to their face. Again, that can also happen with Virgo sun. It can even happen with Virgo moon. It just depends on what's going on in the chart. But it's this sign that pays such close attention to the details of life. Sometimes it will forget to take a step back and look at the big grand picture of things. Okay, now, sign of Virgo is represented by the Virgin. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with being a virgin, but it's more, again, going back to that word pure. The sign of Virgo is about purity, wanting things to be pure and clean. You'll notice a lot of people who have their Venus in Virgo, and this could even happen with Mars in Virgo, where they'll be, forgive the term, a little bit picky about the romantic partner that they're choosing. They want everything to be perfect. They want everything to be pure and clean and perfect. They don't want somebody who's been, sleeping around, that sort of thing, because it's very much this sign of, again, perfectionism. When the sun moves into the sign of Virgo season, for most of us in the world, maybe not Australia, but for most of us in the world, that is harvest season. Okay. That's like the very end of summer, when it's all these things that we've been growing throughout the summer. We get to go out there and harvest our plums and our squash and our zucchinis and our tomatoes and all kinds of things. And with that said, as somebody who's got a lot of experience with this, because I've grown a lot of my own food throughout my life, and I don't have any Virgo in my natal chart at all. I'm a Pisces, which is opposite Virgo. So of course I carry some of this Virgo in nature, but I go out to pick, even if it's just a tomato, something that's very simple to grow. I'm sitting there observing it and analyzing it, thinking, I want this to be perfect. I don't want it to be underripe. Should I wait till tomorrow? But then I don't want it to be overripe. That's a very Virgoan thing, like wanting things to be perfect. Okay. So how have you grown in these ways? Not only that, but this sign of Virgo it's really generally referred to as a sign of health, like physical health and being of service. Okay. So when we take this into consideration, I'll just put this out there right now. The sign of Virgo actually rules very important parts of the body. But a couple things just to mention here, I'll get into this more in depth later, but rules the liver and the intestines, two very, very important parts of our body that keep us healthy. And you'll notice a lot of Virgo people, when I say Virgo people, it's not just Sun in Virgo. It could be so many different things, but it's just if they've got this something Virgoan about them in their natal chart, a lot of times they're the ones that are they're picky about what they eat. They're the ones like shoving, I don't want that piece of food. I'm going to shove that over with the fork, and then fiddling with their food and that sort of thing. And can also be very, very health conscious. Now, certainly not everybody who's a Virgo out there is going to be health conscious. Actually, I know a couple of Virgos who really don't take very good care of their health, but we love them anyway. But a lot of that would have to do with how, if your sun is in Virgo, how it's aspected, what the house it's in, and that sort of thing. But with all this, taking all this into consideration, how have you grown in these ways that are related to the sign of Virgo? Maybe you've been taking better care of your physical health, or maybe you've been being of service in some way, shape, or form. I really do feel that it's so massively important that we all find some way to provide a service in the world, whether or not we're receiving financial compensation for it. I mean, let's say, somebody who doesn't have to work at all. They don't have to have a job. They're, wealthy family or something like that. Still finding something to do to be of service, especially, I mean, for your community, for your family. Say it's, expansive, you're going online and somehow providing a service that way. So hopefully you've found a way to be of service in the world. And if so, you might want to honor yourself for that growth. But also, again, keeping things organized. If you've been, say you decided you finally cleaned out that junk drawer and you finally got that organized, that sort of thing, be a good time to honor yourself for that. But also, what do you want to let go of that's related to this sign of Virgo? Some of this Virgoan nature, I mean, it's all very lovely. I happen to really enjoy this energy. But sometimes there can be this very strong tendency to get so analytical and paying such close attention to the details of things and forgetting to take the step back to look at the whole grand big picture. It's sometimes, and I've seen this with actually a couple clients come to mind, where they don't get the book published or they don't get the website out there because they're too concerned about the funny little details of things. So that's something to consider you might want to let go of. Okay. Or maybe this is kind of a weird one, but I've lived through this myself, where sometimes people can get so concerned about what they're putting in their body. And I mean, from my own experience, I had to be like that because I was so sick. I had every little thing that I put into my body was non-GMO, organic, like the highest quality of anything, which of course is a great thing. But it kind of got to this point where, say my family wants to go out to dinner, like have a family dinner out or that sort of thing. And I would have a really, really hard time finding anything on a menu that I could consume. I'm still a little bit like that, but not to the point where, I mean, I could still, just thinking of a cruise that I went on with my family last summer. From the cruise that I went on, the food was certainly not organic and certainly not a non-GMO, certainly not the highest quality. But, I just kind of had to accept that. Like I kind of had to let some of that go. There is a term for this. I can't remember what it is. There's a term for somebody that's almost to the point of anorexia because they're so massively concerned about every little detail of every little thing that goes in their body. So if that's the case, you might want to consider letting some of that go. But on the other hand, if you've been taking good care of your health, again, it's time to honor yourself for that. So it's a little bit of a tricky one, but also massively important. And be thinking about this as well. If you have anything in your natal chart, even near 24 degrees Virgo, or maybe opposing that near, especially if you got something near 23, 24, and really in anything in the sign of Pisces, because the sign of Pisces is just heavily activated right now. I'll show you that in the chart in a minute here. Or maybe you've got something near 23, 24 degrees Capricorn trining this, or 23, 24 degrees Taurus. My goodness, if you do, you're probably really going through something because that's where Uranus is right now. Maybe it's squaring this near 23, 24 degrees Sagittarius or Gemini. There's so many things that can be applied to our own natal chart. But I think probably what's most important is to know which area of your life. I mean, these eclipses are going to be coming through all the way. These nodes are going to, the North Node will be in Pisces, the South Node will be in Virgo, all the way until the end of July of 2026. So the axis of this, the polarity between Virgo and Pisces, there's so much activity going on there. It's just, you can really benefit from being able to understand, oh, geez, this is activating my house of communication. And then also activating my house of higher learning. And, or, there's so much that could be said. Okay, so there's enough of that said. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the chart here. So if you are new here, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of what we could call the tropical zodiac at the time of this eclipse. Okay, so these right here are the symbols for the planets and the celestial bodies. Like here's Mercury, here's Venus, here's Neptune, here's the sun. We go in the wheel just a little ways. These are the symbols for the zodiac signs that all these things will be beaming through onto Earth at the time of this eclipse. Okay, so let's start here. Again, this is March 13th, which is a Thursday at 11:55 p.m. Pacific time. So again, for most of you out there, it's going to take place on Friday, March 14th, really early in the hours. Okay, so let's start here. Here is the moon at 23 degrees 57 minutes Virgo. This is the symbol for the sign of, or the glyph for the sign of Virgo. So this is really what you'd want to look for in your natal chart. Look to see where this Virgoan energy, which house, these things that look like a slice of pie, which house is coming through for you. Now, the moon in her fullest form. So what's going to happen here? This is what's making this an eclipse, this is the south node, the drain point, and this right here is the sun over here, 23 degrees, 57 minutes Pisces, exactly opposite the moon. And here's the north node at 27 degrees, 23. So what you're seeing here is the nodes, of course, are exactly opposite each other. And the sun and the moon, of course, are exactly opposite each other. That's what happens every time we have a full moon. But those nodes being right next to these guys is what really makes this an eclipse. So the energy's coming in through the north node and going out through the south node. And this is what I'm talking about. Approximately 6 hours after this eclipse, after this eclipse or this full moon, the moon will continue to move along here and transit over that south node, the drain point, poof, taking things away. Again, this is the dragon's tail. This is the dragon's head. It is even described that this dragon's tail is kind of ferocious and it's whipping around when we're having an eclipse because it's right next to Luna in her fullest form. Okay, now let's jump on down here to talk about all this crazy Pisces energy that's going on. So here's the sun, 23 degrees Pisces. Happy solar return season to all you Pisces out there. We got about another 7 days of Pisces season after this eclipse. But what we see going on here, digress for a minute here. Pisces it's the sign of mysticism. It's the sign of spirituality. It's a sign of very strong intuition, like psychic powers for the sign of Pisces. It has a lot to do with, it's so unearthly. The sign of Pisces is really like it's the last sign of the zodiac. It's the sign that's ready to move on into the spirit realm. Okay. And so it's naturally not grounded. Okay. It's naturally kind of like in this little bit of a dreamland. Doesn't mean everybody who's Pisces is going to be like that, but we're all receiving so much of this Pisces energy right now. It's really, really strong. But here is Saturn, which Saturn going through Pisces basically until February of 2026. If I'm going to get specific here, Saturn will move into the sign of Aries in May and be there for a few months and then retrograde back into Pisces until February of 2026. But here we have Saturn so close to the sun. Now, Saturn is certainly not a fun character. Okay, Saturn is the bringer of boundaries and obstacles and blockages and restrictions. Okay. And so the benefits of this, in my opinion, is that it's like Saturn is almost kind of stabilizing some of this wishy-washy Piscean energy. But at the same time, if you've got anything near this, say really anywhere between, I'm going to go down to 18 degrees Pisces all the way up to 29 degrees, 59 minutes Pisces, okay? Then you're receiving this heavy dose of Pisces energy, but you're also receiving that Saturnian influence, the bringer of blockages. A lot of people will feel like if they're having like a heavy Saturn transit, and really this can have a very big effect on the Virgo energy as well, because that's what these red lines are. They're oppositions. Anything that's coming through here, it's beaming through here as well. It's beaming this opposition. Think about that word, opposition, opponent, okay? Now, they'll have feelings of like isolation or things they just can't seem to, it's like a stuck energy. I'm stuck. I can't do this. There's some sort of a blockage going on, or potentially something with a father figure that's, coming in and like a strict energy or something like a discipline kind of energy. Or maybe it's also very well could be something like having to take care of this responsibility. Saturn is all about responsibilities and discipline. But then thinking about the fact that it's coming through this sign of Pisces. Pisces is also a very sensitive energy. By nature, it's a very emotional energy. Okay. a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's constantly feeling what's going on around them, like energetically, picking up signals from other people. And with all that said, I can't tell you how many people, I'm talking clients, family, friends, so many people are going through like this really emotional hard time, like sensing the sorrows in the world, feeling, that life is really complicated. Life can be very difficult sometimes, but a lot of times we just keep on chugging through. I cannot tell you how many people are really feeling like some sorrowful energy as Saturn is going through the sign of Pisces, but especially as Saturn is so strongly conjunct the sun. So that's an exact conjunction the day before this on March 12th, Sun and Saturn. If you've got something in that Pisces area or that Virgo area, there very well could be something going on that might even feel a little bit heavy. Okay, now let's talk about Neptune here. So Neptune, this is an important one, Neptune, because Neptune's been going through the sign of Pisces basically since 2011. And Neptune is what makes Pisces that dreamy, flowy. Neptune is the god of the sea. Neptune is a powerful energy, but powerful in the sense of creating fog, okay? Creating delusions, creating illusions, creating almost like a theater sort of thing or magic, okay? Especially at the 29th degree. That's the anaretic degree. This is so strong. So a lot of people are really feeling this Piscean influence, even if you have nothing in the sign of Pisces. We're all experiencing this. But what's so interesting here is that it would be on March 30th, Neptune is going to move into the sign of Aries. Neptune is going to move over here and go, hey, Aries, which is a very interesting transit in itself. See, again, Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. This is a very, very important transit. Neptune takes approximately 14 and a half years to go through one zodiac sign. So when Neptune changes signs, it's a big deal. Okay. But especially going from the last sign of the zodiac into the first sign of the zodiac. I almost kind of feel like it's something new. And that just adds to the fact that Pluto has recently moved into Aquarius and Uranus is about to move into Gemini. Massive like changes, newness, something new that's coming in, but it probably feels a little unstable, a little bit like it's almost like things around us there's cracks and there's turbulence and that sort of thing going on, but it's just kind of preparing for the newness of something else. There's some other things I could say. I'm just terrified I'm going to scare people. What was it? I think it was the Civil War. The last time that Neptune moved into the sign of Aries was like the day before, the day after that the United States went to war. Gosh, I can't remember exactly what war it was, but I keep thinking about that. I keep thinking, I do think that there's potential for the United States to go into war. I mean, there's always some kind of a war, right? But I don't think it would happen yet. I don't think that the severity, a lot of people are talking about the potential of World War III. I honestly do see potential for that, but I really mean it when I say we shouldn't be scared. If anything, we should, kind of, no matter what your political beliefs are, no matter what your religious beliefs are, no matter what your mentality is, I feel like we all kind of need to sort of stick together and protect each other to a certain degree, help each other, be of service to each other. Okay, so there's enough of that. All right, now let's talk about Mercury here. Mercury is kind of like the lord of this full moon, this eclipse, because again, Mercury rules Virgo. So Mercury currently at 9 degrees Aries for this transit. Now, again, if you think about what Mercury does, that information being processed, it's like Mercury very specifically rules over what's called the afferent nerves, which are the nerves that take information like from, say you touch something, that information being brought to your spinal cord. That's Mercury's job, is to do that. So again, Mercury's this busy character, got to move quick. And the sign of Aries is the cardinal fire sign. Okay. It's like oh, I gotta go. No boundaries for Aries. And so Mercury's pretty revved up here. However, Mercury is also very, very close to Venus, and Venus is in retrograde. I'll talk about that in a moment here. But Venus does kind of have this tendency to calm things down, cool things down, whatever she's next to. Venus likes to, if somebody's too hot, Venus wants to cool down. If somebody's too cold, Venus wants to warm up. Venus is the planet of love, okay? And so she might be taming some of that mercurial, revved up, fiery in the sign of Aries energy. But these guys this is going to be such an interesting thing because, again, Venus is in retrograde. Let's go with this for a minute. If you've got anything near, let's say between 11 degrees Aries, really all the way down to something around like 24 degrees Pisces, Venus is going to retrograde over that thing. If it's something really prominent, like your sun or your Mars or something like that, there could be this potential. When you think about something in retrograde, it's like the time of reevaluation. Okay. It's like rethinking things. Okay. And it could, Venus has this potential to bring like ex-lovers into our life, somebody we haven't talked to for a very long time, or not even, doesn't have to be. And I say that because Venus has a big influence on relationships. She's the planet of love. But it could even be something with a sister. Basically, Venus is directly associated with any female in our life except for mother. Okay, a daughter, a sister, a friend who's a female, a neighbor. That's Venus's energy. So something to do with that, somebody coming back into your life that you haven't seen or heard from for a while, that sort of thing could go on. But it would be this time of reevaluating it. It would be this time of, okay, is there something that's unsettled here? Is there something I need to, wrap up here? And I wouldn't necessarily encourage to take action on that situation until Venus starts to move forward. I apologize, I can't remember exactly when she stops her retrograde. I think it's about 3 weeks after this eclipse. I think she's going all the way back to 24 degrees Pisces, and then we'll move forward again. So maybe after the next video, again, like 2 or 3 weeks after this eclipse, then maybe take action on that thing. Okay. But also Mercury is also going to go retrograde back into Pisces. So these guys are doing this little dance. Mercury and Venus are kind of dancing together between the sign of Pisces and Aries. They were in Pisces, they moved into Aries. Now they're going to retrograde back into Pisces, and then they'll move back into Aries again. So really, the signs of Pisces and Aries are really getting a lot of activity over these next few months. A lot, especially with Neptune going to be moving in there. And then Saturn in May will move into the sign of Aries. It's really strong stuff going on here. I'd say that these are the two most important parts to be looking at in your chart is Pisces and Aries. Again, even if you don't have any planets in those zodiac signs, there's still a lot of activity coming into that area of your life. And also, again, where that sign of Virgo is, the south node, the drain point, will be going through the sign of Virgo all the way until the end of July of 2026. So that drain point is removing something from that area of your life, wherever that sign of Virgo is. Okay, now might as well just talk about Chiron here, because Chiron's going through the sign of Aries all the way. It's like until the summer of 2027. So we still got a little ways to go here with Mr. Chiron. Chiron, the wounded healer, wants us to heal the wounds from early childhood development or previous lifetimes. Beaming through this sign of Aries. And it's interesting too, this is a quincunx. This brown line right here, this is a quincunx from Chiron going up to the moon. Of course, this is all very unique to each and every one of us, but those quincunxes can become somewhat of a blind spot. So these wounds from early childhood development are creating somewhat of a blind spot with this full moon. But regardless, even still, look to see if you've got anything near 21 degrees Aries in your natal chart. Chiron's sitting on that thing and is very much influencing, hey, let's heal these wounds. Let's heal these wounds that are coming from. The thing with Chiron wounds is that they're generally speaking so deep within us that we're not even aware that they're there until we have something that comes up, some sort of a Chiron transit that's like, whoa, I remember that time from being 6 years old and this thing happened and it was, tragic or something along those lines. And really, especially coming through the sign of Aries, Chiron's saying, let's heal these things. Let's heal ourselves. Aries is, again, it's a warrior. It's the sign of self. All right. So there's that. Let's talk about Uranus. Okay. So yeah, here's Uranus, 24 degrees Taurus. So again, if you look, see, hit the moon at 23 degrees, 57 arc minutes. So this is literally 3 arc minutes away from being 24 degrees Virgo. And same with the sun over here, except the sign of Pisces, 23 degrees, 57 minutes Pisces. So that's also 3 arc minutes away from being 24 degrees. With that said, not only that, but it's approaching. It's approaching. In fact, just a couple hours after this full moon, the moon will make an exact trine over here to Uranus. Uranus is at 24 degrees in 2 minutes. So these guys are only, it's a 5 arc minute orb going on between this eclipse and Uranus over here. And then here we have these green lines are sextiles. Okay, so very, very strong connection going on between this eclipse and Uranus. So Uranus influences radical changes, abrupt, strange changes. And we see Uranus finishing, we see what's going on here. Going to the sign of Taurus. So Taurus is very much the sign of money, okay? And our values, like what we do value, when we make our money, what do we want to spend that money on? Because those are the things that we value. That's very much the sign of Taurus. And Uranus is, when I say finishing up in the sign of Taurus, Uranus has been in the sign of Taurus since I think 2000. I think it moved into Taurus in 2017, but then retrograded back and really started getting them to the momentum in 2018. So we're just about done with this. Uranus later on this year, I can't remember when it is. I think it's July. I think it might be July 9th that Uranus moves into the sign of Gemini. But just like the other guys, he's just going to be there for a few months and he's going to retrograde back in the sign of Taurus. And really will just completely be on the sign of Taurus in 2026. But he's finishing up. He's wrapping things up. He's doing these radical, weird changes to things that involve our finances. Okay, look at what's going on with this whole Doge thing. So many massive, weird changes going on. People trying to get out of the centralized banking and all kinds of things that are very much like where our values are. Like, I've worked so hard to make this money. Why am I giving 40% of it to the government, then the government's spending it frivolously? We're seeing massive, massive changes involving that. And I think it's going to really start to pump up here. I think that anything that involves money and finances and just the value of these things, we're going to see even more immense revolutionary changes unfold between now and probably between around May of 2026. Big changes. But I think this eclipse is kind of like, it's shocking it. Look to see if you've got anything near 24 degrees Taurus in your natal chart, because that's a very, very strong transit. Okay, now let's talk about Jupiter here. So Jupiter going to the sign of Gemini until June. Can't remember the exact day, but I think it's like maybe the second week of June. Jupiter is going through the sign of Gemini. So Jupiter, the great benefic, the great expander, Jupiter, the one who brings the abundance. He's like the professor that, if you can envision a professor that's like jolly and like a large person and comes in and he's excited to teach and he wants to be charitable with his teachings and that sort of thing. In fact, Jupiter could even kind of be associated with the whole university, versus the sign of Gemini is this student. Okay, the sign of Gemini, the motto is I think. It's the sign that wants to pay attention to the facts. And so we've got this professor in the student's house until, again, June of 2025, which especially if this is hitting something in your chart, look to see if you got anything near 13 degrees Gemini. You got Jupiter sitting on that thing, and it wouldn't even necessarily only be the sign of Gemini. It could be you've got something near 13 degrees Libra or 13 degrees Aquarius, making a trine with Jupiter right now, or maybe opposing that near 13 degrees Sagittarius. That could also be bringing some sort of, it depends on what it is. And I can't even go into details without seeing your chart. So, but there's that. And I overall, just as a collective here, I do feel like Jupiter going through Gemini is such a good time for studying things that are kind of above and beyond what you would learn in a public school sort of thing. things that are of a philosophical nature, things that are of a metaphysical nature, things that are of an esoteric nature, things that are of, studying ancient civilizations, things like astrology, whatever it is, that I do feel very strongly Jupiter going through Gemini can have a lot to do with that. Things like natural law, common law, that sort of thing. Okay, now let's talk about Mars here, going through the sign of Cancer. Oh boy, Mars is in Cancer until I can't remember exactly, but I think it's sometime in April. Maybe, yeah, I think it's April or like the first week of April. I might be off by a little bit there. It might be the end of March, but here's Mars beaming through the sign of Cancer, which is definitely not Mars's favorite sign because Mars is aggressive. Mars is the planet of war. Mars wants to heat things up. Mars wants to aggravate things. Mars wants to take action. And the sign of Cancer, the motto is, I feel. This is like the real sensitive sign of the zodiac, Pisces and Cancer both. But Cancer is very much, it's this natural energy of empathy. It's this sign that it's almost like the mother of the zodiac, the nurturer of the zodiac. And so Mars going through Cancer, especially, again, if this is hitting something in your chart, hopefully you guys understand what I mean by that. I say hitting something in your chart, it means maybe you've got something near 18 degrees Cancer, or maybe you've got something near 18 degrees Scorpio or Pisces, that those would be creating trines, or maybe it's squaring something. You got something near 18 degrees Libra or 18 degrees Aries. It's sending a ray, Mars beaming, aggressive Mars beaming through the sensitive emotional sign of Cancer, sending a ray to that thing in your chart. So for some people, this very much could be like easily emotionally triggered, or emotional frustrations, or like you need to protect somebody. Mars and Cancer can have a lot to do with like I need to protect this, because again, sign of Cancer is a very protective energy. Once, like, again, it's kind of like the mother, and then Mars, you're trying to protect somebody from somebody else's aggressions. That sort of thing could be going on. So keep that in mind. Now let's go on down here to Pluto. So Pluto going through Aquarius until 2044. So another 19 years of Pluto going through Aquarius. This is another one. We are seeing incredible, powerful, revolutionary changes going on, because that's what Pluto's job is. He wants to completely obliterate something. He's the bringer of degeneration, but then a more powerful regeneration. He's the bringer of a death and rebirth process. When we think about the sign of Aquarius, it's really like the sign of humanitarianism. It's the sign that you could almost think of the sign of Aquarius as like the one that would want to rebel against authority, but not just to rebel against authority. It's more like for the purpose of, for humanity's sake, like the people for the people kind of energy is Aquarius energy. It's like, let's do this for the community. Let's do this as a team. Let's do this. Let's network together. So Pluto creating some very, very, very strong transformational processes really to humanity in and of itself. But also that sign of Aquarius is the sign that's most directly associated with things that are of a electronic nature, or something that has to do with technology. Okay, something that when we think about, my goodness, the technological advances we are seeing, that's going to get blown out of the water. That's going to get blown out of the water, especially over these next 19 years. But I think we're going to see a huge portion of those changes. I'm talking about stuff that we can't even probably envision right now, but things, new, different platforms, social media platforms, or, it's like holograms showing up instead of like, texting somebody or sending them a voice message or whatever. It's like all of a sudden you can just show up as a hologram at their house and be like, here, I have this message for you. And then the hologram goes, that sort of weird stuff. Robots, AI, all of it, crazy technologies. And I also feel like this is going to have a big impact on air transportation. Okay. I'm talking about things like flight, okay, airplanes, that sort of thing. I do think we're also going to see, not immediately, but I think over these next 19 years, because if you think about it, how much have airplanes changed like over the last 40 years? They kind of look the same, right? I think there's going to be new ways of air travel, or even potentially, things like a something that hovers more than just takes flight. I think we're going to see a lot of that. And that in and of itself would create a massive change for humanity. Okay, so did I cover everything I wanted to there? I think I did. Let's move on to body parts. Okay, so the sign of Virgo, as mentioned previously, rules the intestines and rules the liver. Clearly, those are incredibly important parts of our body to be able to maintain optimal health. Okay, when we think about, hallelujah, more and more people are starting to realize this, that how important like the gut microbiome is, making sure we get in our probiotics and our prebiotics and, making sure we're eating our leafy greens and, vegetables and that sort of thing, feeding our gut. Okay, that's a really important thing for this sign of Virgo. But I also feel like I should just start here. The polarity between Pisces and Virgo, out of all, like if you take the zodiac and look at the polarities between any of the zodiac signs, Pisces and Virgo are the two signs that have the biggest impact on really the overall immunity against things, our physical, not even only our physical body, but even going into, beyond the physical body, metaphysics. Oh boy, there's a word I'm trying to think of right now, but it's not coming to my mind. Maybe it'll come to me. Regardless, I feel like it's so important. This whole thing with the nodes going through these signs, Pisces and Virgo, again, North Node going through Pisces, South Node going through Virgo, all the way until the end of July of 2026, because all the eclipses, we will have one eclipse in the sign of Aries, but regardless, most of the eclipse energy is going through those signs. Okay, so I do feel like it's not just the gut, it's like everything within ourselves taken care of. And I also feel more and more people, hallelujah, are starting to realize that we all have parasites. Everybody has parasites. Clearly, some people have more than others. You start to notice people that a major symptom of having a lot of parasites is A, not being able to think clearly, B, aggression, things that, getting easily angry, or it goes on and on. It kind of depends on where the parasites are, that sort of thing. So with that said, a lot of this is coming from our gut, from our intestines, which is that, again, it's that sign of Virgo, also has a lot to do with the liver. So with that said, as I've mentioned so many times before, this is my absolute favorite supplement for keeping parasites in check. Okay, and there are some arguments that, some parasites are actually helping us because if we've got toxic, like heavy metals in our body, let's just go with the simplest terminology here, candida that would wrap around the heavy metal and try to protect our body from that. But ideally, we would have as least amount of parasites as possible. And that's why this supplement, it's called RUG, R-U-G, which stands for Remove Unwanted Guests. I'll leave a link for where you can get this stuff. I sometimes will get into the rhythm of taking this every single day. It's usually I'll do it every single day for like 3 weeks, and then I'll run out of the bottle and then wait a few weeks before I get another one or that sort of thing. But when I'm taking it regularly, and I'm not the only one who says this, like I've seen it from so many people, when we're taking it regularly, we're able to think more clearly. We're able to, just be more productive people. And it's obviously because we're getting the parasites out of our gut, out of our intestines. It's basically just intestinal support. It's just a combination of all the right kinds of herbs, really high quality herbs, to not only flush the toxicity out, or not just only kill the parasites, but also to flush it out of the body. Okay, so there's that. Now, as far as the liver goes, milk thistle. Milk thistle is so simple. This is some milk thistle. Milk thistle grows like crazy where I live. So certain times a year, you can go out there and harvest it. It's kind of challenging to harvest milk thistle because it's really pokey. It's thistle, but if it grows in your area, ideally it's perfect if you can harvest it in your own location. Some thistles, the seeds won't be this big. You can see that it's a little easier to harvest when they're bigger like that, but some are so tiny and it's very tedious work. But you can also, of course, order it online or go to your favorite herb shop, that sort of thing. I do highly, highly, highly recommend organic. because any herbs, anything it's just so sensitive to the pesticides. So there's that milk thistle. And what we do is it is recommended that you grind them up. This is every time that you can buy milk thistle powder, so it's already ground up, but it loses its potency if it's already ground up for, months on end. So if it stays in its, full form here, right before I put it in my tea or whatever, I just put it in a coffee grinder and grind it up. So there's that, making a tea with it. You can also get it in a tincture, that sort of thing. Now, going back to, actually, let me go here first. So the sign of Virgo also has a big influence on the sympathetic nervous system, which is really the thing that kind of throws us into fight or flight. The thing that, like I said, the sign of Virgo has a natural nervousness to it. Like this, it's like not all Virgos are going to be walking around with terrible anxiety or anything like that, but it is, out of all the earth signs, a sign that would be there would be reasons to deal. It's that sympathetic nervous system. So with that said, I don't have any more right here, but hops. I think hops, in my opinion, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm not offering any kind of medical advice, but from my experience, from my own personal experience, but also things that I've learned, it does seem that hops is probably, in my opinion, the greatest go-to for that. But every case is unique. Every individual is different. Not everybody's hops isn't gonna help everybody's sympathetic nervous system. Most people's it would, but there's that. Okay, now, lastly, what I want to mention here, going back to this Pisces Virgo axis, it's like the sign of Pisces is more, Pisces rules over the extracellular matrix, which I've already made a video about that. It has a lot to do with our fascia, like all the sign of Pisces can also have a big influence on all the waters in the body, phlegm, all that sort of thing. Okay, so with that said, when we take all of this stuff into consideration, what my favorite go-to is medicinal mushrooms. Okay, and I've talked a lot about this, and more. I haven't really talked about medicinal mushrooms in a while, but I think that they are, in my opinion, like the greatest thing to just keep our immunity overall strong. Like, I mean, there's certain mushrooms that could be better for this or that and the other thing. What I generally do is do a blend. I'm just going to show you this right here. These are just mushrooms that I've collected from just where I live. And I don't recommend people just go out and pick mushrooms and try it because, of course, they can be very poisonous and very toxic. You want to learn what you're doing first. Like you can see right there, there's a little turkey tail, got some agaricon in here, got some red belted polypores in there. So it's just like a blend. And going even back to the milk thistle, if you can find a local source for any sort of medicinal herbs or just herbs, period, or even your food, that, in my very strong opinion, is the most ideal because you're getting the medicine from the land, which is kind of, at least even within 20 miles of where you live. That's great. And that's kind of why I like to harvest my own mushrooms. But not everybody can do that. So with that said, this is just like a blend. It's just a blend of all different kinds of mushrooms. It's just ground up mushrooms. And I get this from a store just because it's easier for me sometimes. I do make the mushroom tea with my own harvested mushrooms quite regularly. But when I'm just making my little morning tea, I put a little teeny tiny bit of the mushroom blend in here. This is like cordyceps and turkey tail and reishi and lion's mane. And it's a blend, things like turkey tails are, really have helped so many women with breast issues like breast cancer, breast cysts, that sort of thing. Lion's mane can be really good for the brain. Like they all kind of have their own little things for protection. Agaricon tends to be really good and strong against what could be described as viruses. Okay, but that's why it's kind of recommended that we do a little bit of a blend. And so with that said, that's something I've been doing for a long time anyway, but this entire transit with the North Node going through Pisces and the South Node going through Virgo, that's my ultimate, I can't even say recommendation because I'm not a doctor, but hopefully you guys get what I'm saying here. That would be my go-to. Okay, now gemstones. The dedicated zodiacal birthstone for the sign of Virgo is actually a sapphire. And I really have tried to find good information about this because I can't figure out why a sapphire is Virgo's dedicated zodiacal birthstone. Because in traditional, like the Joy Tish traditional Upaye system, blue sapphire is Saturn's stone, okay? Then yellow sapphire is Jupiter's stone. When we think about Saturn's energy, again, Saturn creates responsibilities, okay? Somebody's really slacking on their responsibilities and not being disciplined, that sort of thing. Blue sapphire might be able to help. Or if they've got major inflammation going on in their body, sometimes a blue sapphire, energetically speaking here, could be beneficial for that. Versus Jupiter, the great benefic of abundance and luck and wisdom, is a yellow sapphire. Okay, yellow sapphires, in fact, for Pisces risings and Sagittarius risings, generally speaking, it's recommended to wear a yellow sapphire. For a Capricorn rising or an Aquarius rising, it's recommended to wear a blue sapphire. But where is this connection to Virgo? I don't know, because I can't even find specifically what kind of sapphire is Virgo's dedicated zodiacal birthstone. So with that said, what I'm going to focus on here is more, let's go back to the fact that Mercury rules the sign of Virgo. Mercury's dedicated stone is an emerald, okay? As I mentioned before, it's like Mercury is attached to all these mythological archetypes. The big one is Hermes, which there's some sort of connection between Hermes being the author of the Emerald Tablet. Okay, emerald. And that emerald, like Mercury being Hermes, is connected to that green color, emerald, okay? Virgo rising or Gemini rising very well could benefit from wearing a green emerald. Okay, green emeralds are kind of expensive, but with that said, the more kind of affordable version of a green emerald would be malachite, which malachite is great. Malachite, you don't have to have any Virgo in your natal chart to appreciate malachite. It's very protective. It's grounding. It's stabilizing. It's got copper in it. Copper is Venus's metal. Again, Venus is almost a remedy for everything. So malachite, and one of the top recommended stones from Edgar Cayce. I love malachite. But to mention some other ones here, this right here is, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. It's either Amazonite or Amazonite. I don't know. But it's a beautiful stone. And this one is supposed to be calming to the nervous system. In fact, a lot of greens, it depends on the tone of the green, and it kind of depends on the person's natal chart and the transit that they're experiencing. But greens, for the most part, are said to be beneficial for the nervous system, period. This is obviously not like a hyperactive looking color. It's more like a soothing kind of color. So that's amazing. Now, next one up, I'm going to just pull these up at the same time. Really any kind of agate. Agate is so great. And not only that, but it's like one of the more affordable minerals that, in my opinion, is still very, very powerful. And there's so many different types and colors and shapes of agate. It's all great, very protective, and can be also very good for the nervous system. But specifically for this Virgoan energy, green agate, which again, this comes in, there's so many different, you'll even find green agate that looks like Amazonite or Amazonite. I don't know again how to pronounce it. So the green stones, for the most part, are kind of directly respond to this Virgoan energy. Lastly, I'm going to mention this one here. This is, if you look in the list in the description for, gemstones, that sort of thing. I'm not quite sure why, and a lot of this information does come from the Encyclopedia of Crystals by Judy Hall. Not all the information. There's other books involved here, but some of this stuff is from, it's a great book, the Encyclopedia of Crystals. Okay, this is Smoky Phantom, it's slipping my head right now, amethyst. Smoky Phantom Amethyst. I don't know why the book suggests that. In fact, there's quite a few amethysts in there. There's especially the smoky ones. And it might have something to do with the nervous system, or it might just have something to do with like even opening up the pineal gland, it being opposite Pisces, that sort of thing. But the smoky colored amethyst ones are also, those are the stones that I'm going to be using. Those are the stones that I'm going to be placing on my journal for this eclipse. One more thing to mention here when it comes to these gemstones and eclipses and so on and so forth. I always recommend using something that's slightly protective. Like it's not necessarily ideal to be out there with like a super big old clear piece of crystal quartz during an eclipse because you're amplifying the eclipse energy. So there's that. Okay, I'm going to leave that there. If you would like to schedule an astrology reading, please do visit erinwageastrology.com. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.